if you have not yet heard of it, the Western jurisdiction has a closed Facebook group. And that's a place where people are talking about this transition from going to regular worship to worship online, and some other stuff a little bit having to do with this transition. But it's really geared for, what do I need to do? What was my success? I had this problem. Who can help? About moving to an online worship platform, from the gear to software to lineups for worship, revised lineups. And the idea came from James Kang, the Director of Communications and Innovation of the California Pacific Conference. So he couldn't join us right now, but he is with us in spirit. And Patrick Scriven is another huge organizer, participant. He seeded the Facebook group with an excellent video in collaboration with David Valera. So if you guys haven't seen this video, it covers quite a bit of different angles on moving to a live stream platform. What are the things that you need to consider? But Patrick, do you think you could share with us a little bit about some of the comments that you've seen in that group? Maybe the differences between pre-recording and live stream.
Sure, sure. And thank you all for being here. This is, it's kind of uncharted waters for us all. And that's a little bit of what I love about this group, and what I'm seeing in the way that people are interacting there. There's a lot of people for whom this is the analogy that's in my head is, this is like a sporting event, and this is like the first quarter. Yeah. And folks went out in the first quarter, and a lot of them got kind of pummeled. A few people made a couple 3-point shots, and but it was a rough first quarter for a lot of people. But what I think you'll encounter in this group is kind of like that huddle, and maybe that's what happens at halftime. But that huddle, that the team is supporting each other. They're saying, yeah, pass me the rock, but it's okay. Here are some things that we're trying that are working, and here are some things that aren't. People have been pretty humble, and even when they've been sharing about the things they're trying, that they're excited about. So there's a good mix. There's not a lot of ego that I've sensed so far. And so if this is the first week you're going to have to do this, or if you're a week or two into this and your church doesn't have a practice of doing this regularly, you'll be amongst other folks who are in a very similar place. There are a few people in the group who do have a little bit more experience, and that's been helpful too, because as you'll encounter with Greg and David later, that people who have done this either professionally or not can be great and both of them are actually in the group as well, can be great at offering advice on the little technological fixes. And we're all church people, so most of those ideas happen to be reachable financially. And there's not a lot of, oh, hey, invest in this $10,000 platform kind of solutions in that group. So does that help?
So what would you choose if you're running worship for your church? Would you do pre-record or live stream, and why choose one over the other?
Yeah, so let me just share. I'm a pastor's spouse, so this is a real thing in my family. And even though we had a practice of taping sermons and distributing them digitally after the fact, the idea of producing material in advance of worship caused a fair amount of anxiety in my family too. Even though my wife could go, oh, my husband can take care of the video piece, right? So for our church, we've leaned into pre-recorded because both of us grew up in traditions that were not what I would call Holy Spirit driven movements. And that's my church way of describing this, that you have to be pretty comfortable, especially if you're new to these kind of platforms, be pretty comfortable with being willing to just allow things to develop if you're gonna live stream. So if So one of our churches in the Northwest, the pastor live streamed from the get-go, and unfortunately he had his phone locked in the wrong orientation. So he was going for about, I stopped watching at a certain point because I was like, oh, um, but yeah, he was sideways the entire time. But again, that's the kind of thing, like, okay, next week I know not to do that, right? That's the kind of thing that you can't control in a live stream environment. So if you are like me and you feel like you need to have an order and a structure, you want to probably lean into pre-recording until your comfort level with a live streaming platform is there. So find other ways to experiment with the live streaming first, besides jumping into that right away. um, some of the platforms allow us to simulate some of the live stream experience as well. For example, on Facebook, you can post your pre-recorded material and schedule it to what they call a premiere. And then you can tell your people that we're going to premiere this video at a certain time on Sunday morning. And then you can watch along with your members as they're commenting, liking, loving, maybe some of those other emotions as well, and add comments and answer questions as that content is going up live. So it's kind of almost a middle ground between those two extremes. So for my wife's church, though, we produced a video that was largely the sermon, and then she produced a digital liturgy and encouraged people to go through it. And then she, people were encouraged to do it around 10, but people have done it throughout the week, actually. And it had number of prayers. They're encouraged to try to do it with other people if they could. Light a candle and then kind of go through. But our congregation is, a little bit, it's Methodist. So most of the folks are a little older. So we didn't think that jumping right into a live stream was necessarily going to be the comfort thing right off the bat for them.
If you're moving your service from in-person to online, are there any considerations that you have to take? Do you modify the service at all? I mean, even considering whether or not you're going to use music, it's just, attention spans.
Absolutely. Um, I know there's probably a fair number of pastors out there, but this is something I learned from confirmation class as a youth worker, is especially with young people who did not grow up in the church. A lot of the things we do in a worship setting don't make sense, and the only reason they do make sense to most of us is because we grew up with them, and they've become part of who we are. So this is an opportunity actually to think about, what are the things that we do in corporate worship on Sunday morning? What are those things? How do they make sense in that space? Do they still, or do we still do them because we've always done them? And then in this process, what do we take with us? And I think we do need to be attentive to things like attention spans. So one adaptation my wife made, for example, in her sermon this week, was to break it into 3 different chunks. And so there were these pauses where she encouraged people to, pause the video, basically stop, ask a question, and discuss something for a couple minutes, and then come back. And so that's one adaptation, but there's a lot. I'm kind of excited to see how our clergy adjust to this over time. And I think for some churches, they will take their worship experience that they're normally doing and then just bring that into the digital space. And that's what they're going to do. And that's fine. But for others, this could be one of those times where we come up with something that's really cool.
What about, so in your monitoring of the Facebook group, and I realize, FYI, everybody, we're not on there 24/7. We're all trying to be on there as much as we can, but this is more of a help each other group than funneling to your director of communications. So, we try to go through and help out as much as we can. Have you noticed like a really common pitfall that people have encountered, and has anybody shared how to overcome it?
Yeah, one of the really common pitfalls is one that people don't get right away, um, if they haven't done video work before, and it's the importance of audio to video. Um, Most of our spaces are these big, people wanted to do this, often wanted to do this in their sanctuary, and that's not a bad choice. Um, but those spaces, if your audio source is your phone, or if your microphone is your phone, that space can be kind of terrible for that, especially if you start adding elements like a choir or whatnot. So that has come up a number of times. I know that Greg has offered some particular things. I think David as well. I'm not the sound guru, but there have a number of people have been offering little devices that you can connect to your soundboard uh, to then route to whatever you're using for video. So that would be probably the number one thing, especially in a streaming situation. If my video freezes, um, but my audio keeps going, that's okay. But if my audio freezes, even if you can see me moving my hands around, it is disconcerting, and it can break whatever kind of worship experience you're trying to create.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Let's see if we have any questions for this segment about pre-recording versus live stream.
While you're processing questions,
Yeah.
can I share my screen really quick?
Yes, please.
Okay. Oh, I gotta find the right window. Way too many windows open. Okay, I think this is the right one. So I just wanted to show those who are on this, if they wanted or interested in trying to join this group, you go to the Western Jurisdiction Facebook group or Facebook page, and it's WJUMC, and you click on groups, and you would find the group there, and you would have to ask to join, and somebody would, your director of communications would probably be there right after this webinar is done to help to accept all those invitations. But that's basically what you do. You wait a little bit, and then you'll start getting notifications from conversations, and you can leave questions there. And the folks there, as Christina mentioned, are helping each other.
Allison asked about with you using Facebook or YouTube Live, but can you then download and burn DVDs for those who are not online or tech savvy? I might add to that, you can also save them to thumb drives maybe these days. I know one church who does that. Could you speak a little bit about how that fits with either the pre-production or the live production world to be able to capture that video for other uses?
Yeah, yeah. In both cases, that would be possible, but you'd have to have the equipment to do it. I would echo kind of what you're that thumb drives are a little easier to use, but if your audience doesn't have a computer, then if you yeah, I mean, DVDs would be another route. Um, a lot of computers today don't actually have DVD ROMs or drives anymore, burners. So we're in this space where, a large portion of the world has moved into the cloud or into digital space, and but our churches have a lot of people who haven't quite made that transition. So with equipment, absolutely, there's no reason why you couldn't do it. A lot of our churches have done this for years with their audio tape ministries and CDs and all that, so it'd be that same kind of model.
And we'll just add, there are some licensing requirements to that, right?
That's correct.